It seems that Donald Trump may have just crossed the line that puts us in somewhat uncharted territory. Just for point of reference, this is, where is it? All right here. The person speaking is IRGC's Iranian Revolutionary Guards Quds commander or leader, Qasem Soleimani. Very powerful, especially from the standpoint of foreign policy in the area of the Middle East. To put it in perspective, he sent a letter to Petraeus saying the following: General Petraeus, you should know that I, Qasem Soleimani, control the policy for Iran with respect to Iraq, Lebanon, Gaza, and Afghanistan. And indeed, ambassador in Baghdad is a Quds Force member. The individual who's going to replace him is also going to be a Quds Force member. To say that he's a military leader doesn't quite get it across. He answers directly to Khomeini, and if there's any similarities from the standpoint of their system and ours, he would be something like a vice president or something like a head of state. Maybe, like the head of the CIA or to some effect, but not just a military person, but a higher up in the context of the Iranian government itself. Donald Trump has okayed an airstrike, and that airstrike has hit his target. This is another airstrike in Iraq that hits essentially the Iraqi airport, Baghdad's airport. This kills multiple people, but this gentleman was the target. Qasem Soleimani, the commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force unit, and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandas, the deputy head of Iran's backed Popular Mobilization Force, were among those killed in an attack at Baghdad's airport early Friday, the PMF said in a statement. The Iraqi military said 3 rockets were fired at the airport. The total number of people killed is unclear. The Pentagon makes a comical statement that they took quote-unquote defensive action in somebody else's country to protect U.S. personnel abroad. Now, whatever you want to think of this guy, and this is their person who does assassinations and who plans this stuff out and, like you said, controls policy for this particular region. This is major escalation. It is hard to get that across. If Dick Cheney got whacked, if Gina Haspel got killed, if, I don't know, I'm trying to get this point across on this is a high level up person that we've just assassinated. I want to read to you one of the threads from somebody who's following this. So, Isar Ali, I can't understate how major this is, not just for a moment in U.S.-Iran relations, but major global event. The people comparing us to killing Osama bin Laden don't know what they're talking about. This is way more equivalent to another country killing the United States vice president. Soleimani is extraordinarily close to the supreme leader of Iran. Soleimani reports directly to the supreme leader. The Quds Force is technically part of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which also reports to the supreme leader. He is more powerful than the Iranian president. Quds Force and its proxies are responsible for assassinations, terrorism, and unconventional warfare that Iran supports in countries like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. They're also responsible for successful and unsuccessful attempts at terrorist acts and assassinations in countries like Argentina, United States, India, and Germany. In response to this, one of the reporters, she's from the New York Times, Iranian sources in Iran are warning that killing General Qasem Soleimani spells war. The official reaction will begin with a strike, one source says. Other people are making the argument that this is going to be asymmetrical warfare. There's apparently a meeting going on right now about how they're going to respond to this. We are in uncharted waters in regards to how they respond to this, because this is a big deal. This is a massive deal. And in fact, look at what's trending on Twitter. Iran, trending number 1. Soleimani, trending number 2. Iraq, number 3. Middle East, number 4. Surviving R. Kelly, strangely enough, is at number 5. We are in an escalating game of quid pro quo. And it's an escalation where the United States does not respect that other people exist. It's this weird notion that we believe that when we take an action, that the other people shouldn't respond to the action that we take. Do you honestly believe that this action is going to just settle it? And do you honestly believe that either the Trump administration thought that, or that the people who went about doing this military strike thought that? Because if they did, they are comically bad at their jobs. Of course there was going to be an escalation for doing something like this. Of course they were going to up the ante. Effectively, you've had an airstrike on Iraqi soil. Iraq's president said don't do it. They did it anyway. It was an outright violation of Iraqi sovereignty. In violating Iraqi sovereignty, they killed various members that were called Iranian, but whether they were affiliated with Iran or not, they were under the auspices of the Iraqi president, or you can say the Iraqi military. This did not go over well. And there was a response. The response being Iran gave their blessing, do what you got to do. They attacked the embassy. In fact, in attacking the embassy, they, for the most part, broke through and getting into the embassy. Now, nobody was killed in this. Tear gas and all this other stuff was fired. But it was this image, this picture of the U.S. Embassy being utterly and entirely under siege. The Iraqi security guards that were supposed to be guarding the embassy let him go through. Now, we invaded their country saying they were weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. This is after sanctions that were put through that killed 500,000 children. Not to mention adults, just children, because they couldn't get the meds and whatnot that they needed. This was under a Democratic administration. Bush went through whole hog, destroying the oil, destroying infrastructure, be it energy, be it water. We utterly demolished that country, got rid of their security forces, their military, meaning de-Ba'athification of that particular country. We outright, utterly destroyed that country. We spent $7 trillion to do it, but from their standpoint, 1 million people dead, not to mention the number of refugees, not to mention the horror of having foreign invaders on your soil, kicking down your door, killing your family members, and you have no recourse in this action. And we believe they're going to guard our embassy? Why? Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Yeah, they're going to let him go through. You've just had airstrikes on their sovereign territory, meaning their territory is not sovereign. No, the president cannot come to the side of the United States on this because, for the most part, he still has a country himself that he has to worry about. And the organization that they attacked, whether that organization was closely affiliated with Iran or not, the people that were being killed, most of those people in the airstrike were Iraqis. The U.S. has this airstrike. And they're taking it as if this is a kind of retaliatory act. But again, this notion of quid pro quo. Iran will respond to this. By all notion, by all thought, Iran would respond to this. If Vice President Pence was killed in an assassination attempt, let's say a drone is flying overhead when Trump and these guys went to visit the troops, what do you think the United States response would be? If Gina Haspel was whacked when she was out somewhere, what do you think the United States response would be? And if you believe that the U.S. would respond to something like that, why don't you believe Iran would do the same? Many people in the U.S. don't believe they'll do the same because, oh, they're a weaker power, they need to acquiesce, they need to... Nonsense. You've put sanctions on their country. You've made it difficult for that country to get medicine. You've made it difficult for that country to even interact with the global community, meaning having other countries pull out of doing business with them. I tell you this. Recently, Iran, China, and Russia were doing joint military exercises. All of them. You, or let's say us, have pushed them closer together in order to form a military bloc, an alternative version of the world of sorts. This would also get into, at some point, this notion of money, whether or not the dollar remains its currency, or whether they even have a system themselves that they operate in. But ultimately, an alternate world view, all being pushed because of our behavior towards them. It didn't have to be this way. This was a policy that Trump chose. This policy has failed at every step of the way. And for a president that didn't necessarily want war, these actions are outright provocative. I don't know if he was smart enough to realize that his people in his administration that is telling him to do X or telling him to do Y, if he was told of the consequences of that. And if he was told that they're not going to do anything in response, then that is massively unfortunate, and he was massively misinformed. We have no idea how Iran is going to respond to this. It could be a cyber attack. It could be some kind of outright hysterical attack of sorts. But the fact is, we're talking about a response. And that response may beget another response by the U.S. This is a slow walk in a quid pro quo sense to war. I mean, I don't know what else to call it. Either these sides de-escalate and this quid pro quo evens out, or this just continues where one act begets another act. And I'm sorry, this administration does not accept or have any kind of historical context or even an understanding of why other countries behave why they behave. You see it across the board. You see it with North Korea, where North Korea, look, we need a nuclear weapon because we need to defend ourselves. And Trump is like, well, you guys need to completely denuclearize before we have anything else. Meaning you need to entirely capitulate before we even have a conversation with you. And that's essentially how it acts across the board. In Afghanistan, what was U.S. policy? We destroyed the poppy crops or the heroin crops. And, there shouldn't be any consequence of that. Well, of course there are going to be consequences. Those people went to join the Taliban because they were angry at you, but that you destroy their crops. How is it? I don't understand this logic that believes that we can, for the most part, just run roughshod across the globe like this. There will be consequences to this. What those consequences are, it is unclear. Everything I'm reading up to this point is saying that the consensus is that we are in uncharted territory. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.